Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Lori Smith on Blog Talk Radio. It is 6 o'clock here in the morning, Tuesday morning, December the 14th. I'm happy to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another, and we're on for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room is open, and I'm going to pop the link in there. Actually, I'm going to have to type the link in there to the show this morning. And, I'm thankful for everybody who's tuning into all my shows. I appreciate everybody who's listening. I would have something interesting to look at here. This is from mentalhelp.net, and there's some interesting articles on there about abuse and about what survivors go through. And I found this article not too long ago, sort of recently, and some of the information on there is kind of I do want to take a look at, because it's really it's put in a way that, you know, for a lot of survivors it makes sense, right? And so that's why I want to take a look at it, and it kind of asks some questions as well. So we'll be able to look into this. So thanks everybody for being here. You know, I'm not a counselor or therapist. I don't hold any certificates in those areas. I'm just a private citizen paying to do my own shows, and mainly just to be another voice out here for people, you know, who are survivors of abuse, and just to be a voice of encouragement, to say, you know, hold on, and, you know, make sure that you reach out and get some help in whatever way that works for you, you know, whether it's just having a good friend to talk to, or a support group of some type, you know, or counselor, therapist, you know, whatever you have to do, right? But you just make sure that you do, you know, get some help. You sure don't deserve to suffer in this, and so many people are, and that's the sad part. That's why I want to be just another voice for people, and just, you know, to show people that, hey, they're not alone, and there's you know, there is good information out there, and we have to choose to want to really want to heal. That was a choice I made 4 years ago, and so it's taken me, you know, a long time to get where I'm at today, and it doesn't happen overnight, and you have to be able to, you know, at some point work through a lot of stuff, and that's what it's all. I think that's what most people would say it's all about. So, you know, I'm not a counselor or therapist. You have to listen at your own discretion. I'm talking about all the time, everything to do with abuse. It's a very sensitive topic, and a lot of people are very uncomfortable listening to the topics like about abuse. And so if the topic makes you uncomfortable, then you have to turn the show off. You know, you have to listen at your own discretion. I know I don't mind talking about it, because I've lived my whole life with these issues, and I was abused as a child, so it doesn't bother me to talk about it. It bothered me to be abused, is what it bothered me, but it doesn't bother me to talk about it. So, you know, you have to be sure, like, what you feel okay and comfortable with. So if the show bothers you, it's your discretion. You have to turn it off, or change the channel, or do whatever you're going to do there, but you are responsible for what you listen to, so make sure you listen at your own discretion. Young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my show, and the reason I do that is because I believe that children have the right to protection at all times, and not too many people feel that way, obviously, and that's why kids are getting hurt. But, you know, you have the right to protect yourself, too. If you get that information and you learn how to stay safe online, you can learn how to protect yourself in chat room situations, and when you're online, and you know, learn about the facts about the whole issues of online sexual predators and pedophiles and whatnot who try to get a hold of children. So anybody under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows, and there's a lot of adult content on my shows, and that's why I ask that. And I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and we're fighting to save children's lives. You know, that's what we do. And so we're really working on you know, upholding the rights of the child, which is protection and safety and security for children, an abuse-free life, you know. And so, you know, you need to get the education on how to keep yourself safe when you're online. It's very, very important. So we'll get right into the show here, and I want to just sort of take a look at this article I found from mentalhelp.net. You can just go to your browser and type in there mentalhelp.net. It'll bring up that particular website, and you can look at I would just look for the articles on abuse. And what I'll do is I'll go back at some point and grab that real link for you. You know, but I know you can get it from if you just type in mentalhelp.net, it'll bring it up. But this particular information is written by Catherine Patricelli. Catherine, it's Kathryn, and then Patricelli, Patricelli. And this is a little bit, you know, older materials from 2005, but it doesn't matter, because what she's written here is very interesting, and I think that this is worth taking a look at. She kind of looks. There's a whole schwack of articles about related to abuse and child abuse and domestic violence. And if you go on this website, you can click on all the links. And I just really like the way she's kind of taking a look at child abuse, and because it's a mental health type website, right? They're really looking at what it causes and what the real damage is, what it really does to people, and what child abuse really does to children, and then later on as adults they have to overcome. And so I think that's why I want to cover this, and we'll spend a while on here. There's some really awesome information here for anybody who wants to go and check this out. So I hope that you will. And so I'm just basically going to read from this website, and we'll just talk about it as usual. And it's this is like an introduction to abuse, and that's what it's called. Introduction to Abuse by Catherine Patticelli. And she says here, abuse occurs when people mistreat or misuse other people, showing no concern for their integrity or innate worth as individuals, and in a manner that degrades their well-being. Says abusers frequently are interested in controlling their victims. They use abusive behaviors to manipulate their victims into submission or compliance with their will. So, she's just kind of spelling it right on out there. Abusers control and compel their victims in a variety of ways. They may verbally abuse them by calling them names, tell them they're stupid, have no worth, or will not amount to anything on their own. They may become physically violent, inflicting pain, bruises, broken bones, and other physical wounds, visible and hidden both, right? They may rape or sexually assault their victims. Alternately, they may neglect dependent victims, disavowing any responsibilities that they may have towards those victims, and causing damage through lack of action rather than through a harmful manipulative action itself. So this is just it. I mean, it's harsh what people do to people, and especially, it's bad enough with domestic violence and abuse, where a woman or a man is being abused, and mainly it's women. But some men we know have been abused by their partners, and even in same-sex relations, like intimate relationships, people just abuse people. What really bothers me is people who abuse their children, because children have really no way to protect themselves. And, the whole idea that the society just thinks that, it's no big deal. It's like, well, put yourself in that child's shoes for a few minutes, or inside that child's body, and try to think about what that would be like. You can't protect yourself, so you're basically at the whim and the mercy of your abuser, right? And so it is so incredibly damaging, because you can't control what's happening to you. And so many children, in so many ways, like she's put here, will be verbally abused, emotionally, psychologically abused, physically abused. With physical and sexual abuse, there is always, the psychological damage done with it, right? And emotional problems, right, because of it. And so, it's so heinous and horrible what people do to other people, and especially to children, because adults, unless they're tied up to a chair, I don't know. There's so many psychological reasons why women, and especially women, stay in abusive relationships, and sometimes, they just feel that it's the best thing to do, and other times it's just because, they're afraid to they know what they have there, so they're afraid to go out into the unknown. They're not quite sure what'll happen out there in the unknown, right? So they sometimes stay because of that. There's so many reasons behind that, but children don't have a way to get out of that, until they reach a certain age, and they can just run away, and that's no good, because then they're on the streets and vulnerable to the crazy abusers out there on the streets who are looking for vulnerable children to exploit and everything else, right? So it's not good, and we know that as survivors, right, that this sort of stuff. We're not alone in this, and it's very sad. It'd almost be like better if there was only just ever one of us, and that it was just a one-time case only, because that would mean there'd be a whole world of people that had never had to experience this horrible stuff. But the fact of the matter is that we know that there's so many people out there who have, and it's kind of like we don't deserve to continue on as an adult suffering from what happened to us as a child, and that's why it was so important for me to decide that I could heal from that, because I kept thinking, how long am I going to have to suffer this, stuff that happened to me so long ago, and yet would have such a grip and a control on my life. So in other words, my parents, my abuser parents, still had control of my life until I made a clear decision, at like the age of 41 to to not allow that anymore, right? And to accept the fact that I was going to have to heal, and it was going to have to be me to do it, and that it was going to have to be me that was in control, and not allow my past to control my future. You know what I'm saying? But until we see that, quite often, as survivors, we'll sit around and suffer in this, for a lifetime. And it's like I thought, oh no way, I'm fighting this, Like I just made a pact, really a commitment to myself, and said I'm not going to let my parents destroy me because, or destroy myself, because that would mean they would win this fight. And since I'm like a dog with a bone and very much stubborn, no way, I'm winning this fight. So I'm gonna stay healthy. I'm gonna be well. I'm gonna have a good life, and I'm gonna enjoy myself. And at the end of the road, I'm gonna win this fight. And when I go to my grave and my days are over here on the earth, I know that I'm gonna come out the winner. Because I'm not going to let what happened, what my parents intentionally did to destroy my life, I'm not going to let them win. So I'm not going to destroy my life, and I'm not going to allow I'm not going to allow what they did to me destroy my life. And I think, until we start to see things a little bit differently, it's hard because we're sitting around with this one track thinking, this one frame of mind, because that's all we've been comfortable with, that's all we've known. So it's good to you step out of the box a bit, and really start thinking and look at the whole picture and realize that, hey, we can get help. We can learn to enjoy this life and get, and make some goals, set some goals, find some dreams and go after them, and enjoy our lives. We don't have to allow this to destroy us, right? But it makes me sick that people think this is just no big deal, That's why I decided to speak out against this, because I'm like, there's a whole portion of society that thinks that this is just no big deal for a child to be abused. It's like, have you been in my shoes? Let alone any one of these people out here who are survivors, or let alone one of these children out here who are right now being abused. Have you been in their shoes? Because if you had, you wouldn't be saying that. There's a whole lot of people that think that they know what they're talking about, and would say, oh well, it's no big deal. I was abused and I'm fine. Well, good for you. You know what I mean? Because when someone's horrifically abused and their whole psyche is damaged and so harshly malaligned, with what it should have been as a child, you know what a big deal it is, So, most survivors, real survivors of abuse, would never say that because we know what it's like. So it's a serious issue. And if it wasn't no big deal, then children wouldn't be dying and people wouldn't be committing suicide years and years later. So it is a big deal, and it's absolutely horrible. So she says here that abuse is a commonplace event in modern times, taking on many different forms, including physical, sexual, emotional, verbal, and verbal abuse occurring in many different contexts, including the home, domestic violence, spouse, rape, incest, and the workplace, sexual harassment, and in institutional situations like elder abuse, bullying, and religious and community hate crime settings. It touches victims across the lifespan from children through elders. Abuse is a serious social and cultural problem affecting everyone, whether as a victim of abuse or a perpetrator, a friend or confidant of an abused person looking for ways to be helpful, or simply as someone who is angered by injustice and wants to work for positive change. So it really does affect us all. A lot of people think it doesn't, but it will. It says if you are currently being abused or have been abused in the past, you should know that you do not suffer alone. Right now, millions of people around the world struggle to maintain dignity, safety, and self-worth in the face of ongoing abuse. Millions more people struggle to recover from wounds they have sustained during past abuse. She says you should also know that help is available for victims of abuse, although it is not always easy to access. Community abuse resources such as domestic violence shelters, mental health professionals, law enforcement, and various other organizations, websites, and printed resources can provide instruction and assistance for people who need help removing themselves from abusive situations. And yeah, I mean, I've talked to people who, especially in domestic violence situations, I've talked to people who said, that they tried to get help and there just wasn't, the services just were not available. And I mean, this is sad, but it's true. In Calgary, I don't know how many domestic violence shelters we have, but we have a lot. And Calgary is a city the size of, I guess, it's a little over, around 1 million people. And there's a lot of problems here in this city. It's all hidden away nicely, tucked away, because everybody likes to think of Calgary as being this abuse-free place, but actually there's a lot of abuses going on here every day. And I see a lot of stuff that's just kind of like, like people, the homeless people here. There's a lot of drug problems here in this city. There's a lot of crime, and there's a lot of hurting people. And yet it's a city that really in Canada it's one of the most prosperous cities as far as being looked upon as being a good city to live in. It is actually a really good city to live in, but it has its share of problems, is what I'm saying. But it's all nicely tucked under the rug. Nobody wants to talk about it. We have a whole lot of abuse going on here as well. And the domestic violence shelters are full all the time. They're full. So you can imagine, if let's say every single woman who needed to get out because they feared for their life, and even some men, and they actually tried to access those domestic violence shelters, if they all did that all at once, there would not be enough room. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. This is such a huge problem, and that doesn't even include the whole situation with children. Where do you put the kids? I mean, it's like this is an absolute disgraceful crisis worldwide. So not just in Canada, not just in the United States, worldwide. Like this is it's just horrific, But I would say, we have some resources here, where in other parts of the world, especially the countries that are just not doing so well, there's a lot of poverty and whatnot. They don't have the systems in place to help their people. But even here, even with the systems in place, you still can't get help a lot of times. And what I would say is just never give up, right? Never give up. Just we've already survived what we've survived, right? That's the whole issue. It's like we've survived what we survived, and thank God, if you're still here, then that means you survived. And so you have to not give up on it now. And that's my big issue. It's like, okay, we have to make a commitment to ourselves that we won't give up on ourselves, and that we'll continue to do whatever we have to do to look for help. And if it might mean a whole lot of waiting around and phone calls and trying to get in touch with people. But eventually, at some point, you're going to run into the right person, because it happens to so many people who are in the same boat, right? And they just don't give up. They insist upon getting some help. So whatever you have to do, man, it's like me. I wouldn't give up, because I'm like a dog with a bone. I'm so committed to this now that I'm just like, no way. If I have to do whatever I have to do to get help, that's what I'm doing. And I would encourage anybody to do that, right? So she says here that victims of abuse often find themselves dealing with serious psychological and physical consequences of having been abused. And there are various forms of counseling, psychotherapy, medical, and self-help resources available for people who have been abused and want assistance and support for managing problems and issues they have developed as a result of being abused. And so she's kind of this is just an overall article on, the issues of abuse, right? So, hello everybody in the chat room. I got Gypsy Witch and Mrs. Gator here with me. Good morning. Glad to see you guys. Hope you're well, and I hope you had a good weekend. And so yeah, she's just kind of talking about, it's an introduction to abuse, right? But these next articles that we're going to go through are very much detailed and really quite sort of address different situations and different issues, regarding mainly child abuse and some domestic violence. So we'll continue on with this for sure. But she says some people aren't sure if they are being or have been abused. They may know that they have been harmed, but they may think that they deserve that harm, for instance, or perhaps think instead that some degree of harm is acceptable or reasonable or just inevitable. And though it is not possible for us to give you a definite answer to any questions you may have about what is abuse and what is not abuse, consider that people who haven't been abused don't tend to spend much time wondering whether they have been abused, while many people who have been abused or are being abused do wonder about it. So if you are upset enough to wonder about it, it is likely, although not definite, that you have been abused. We'll explore the definitions of abuse in greater detail in this document, so she does go on to talk about that, all the different types of abuse and whatnot. But it's, that's just the whole issue. If something wasn't, like if you know what happened to you as a child and you were mistreated really and neglected, or you experienced some physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional, psychological abuse, sexual abuse, and you were cognitive enough, you were conscious enough, and you were old enough and in your memories you have, and you know that this happened to you, or you even have proof because you have documentation or whatever, then you know you've been abused. But there are some people out there who might question it and say, I don't know if I was abused, because they might not know even to recognize what abuse is. Because sometimes within the context of families, if it's the normal behavior, and then, when they grow up in it and no one intervenes and they don't get to see anything else, they might think that that's actually very normal. And it's, you know what I mean? Like, especially, there's a whole lot of that with sexual abuse. There's a whole lot of that with regarding incest and whatnot in families where, it's just they're told that this is the normal thing, this is what people do. They grow up doing this with, whoever's the perpetrator is in the family, whether it's one of the parents or one of the siblings or, somebody like that. Then they might think that's normal. You know what I mean? And, quite often, they would know that it's not normal, depending on the situation, because I've heard and read stories of survivors who said that it felt completely normal because they were told it was normal. You know what I mean? And so, I don't know, it's just kind of bizarre. It's just a very strange thing, like the human mind, you know what I mean? It's because children are like sponges. So whatever they're learning from their parents, that's what they believe is normal. You know what I mean? I really didn't think that I didn't realize really that I was being abused until I had a family point it out to me. You know what I mean? I knew there was problems in my home. I knew that my parents were fighting, and I knew that I was being abused. But in the meantime, and of course it hurt. You know what I mean? But in the meantime, I just thought that was my life, and that was, that's the way it was. A lot of people around me were being abused, so I sort of thought, well, that's life. It's violent. It's horrible. And I became an abuser as a child because I was a bully and pushing the kids around, and quite often pushing little kids down and telling them to get away from me, and basically just doing what my mom was doing to me, right? And destroying property, because my parents were always destroying our house, right? Destroying property. So I was a big one for destroying schoolrooms, restaurants. I would go I'd be on my own running around with my friends at the age of like 8, 9 years old. We'd go into these restaurants and trash them, and that's what I was shown how to do at home. So I just kind of thought, well, that's what you do when you're wherever you're at, and hurting people. I used to, because my mom was always hurting me and other people in the family, so was my dad. It was real easy for me to hurt somebody as a young person, right? Because that's what I thought was normal. And, until even through my teen years, right? But especially when I met a family when I was about 12 years old, and I started to watch their behaviors, and I knew some other families as well that were not abusive. So I was watching their behaviors and noticing that, hey, they don't do that stuff. They don't beat on their kids. It doesn't look or appear that they hurt each other. You know what I mean? They're not trashing their house, and they're not screaming and yelling at each other. Well, this is a little different. And then I hung out with a girl who, her parents were really awesome and used to kind of, they totally sort of took me in as one of their kids, and actually intervened for me one time when I was 13 and a half. So that's all. I got to see some loving relationships, nurturing relationships outside of my own home, which is kind of what made me realize that, hey, there was something completely twisted about what was going on in my home. The psychological damage, I can tell you, a lot of key people would say, well, how would you even know if you were being abused, as a young child like that, especially, around 7 years old, 6 years old, where my memories were really intact, because I totally remember how I felt, what was going on. I have very clear and distinct memories of a lot of the different crazy stuff that was going on around in the home. And, people would say, how would you know that that's, that was even abuse or, abusive? And probably I would say because of the depth of the psychological damage from my dad, because my dad was he's mentally ill. He's borderline schizophrenic, which I think he's a little bit more schizophrenic than borderline. I think they kind of misdiagnosed him a long time ago. But the thing is that he was, it was like a horror show at my house, you know what I mean? And not that it wasn't the norm, because it was still very scary, you know what I mean? Like when you have your parents go flying off the handle, threatening to kill each other, threatening to kill the family, threatening to kill the kids, and my dad was quite often having these psychotic episodes, and usually at night, because my dad's that was his thing. I think he's afraid of the dark, and he thinks demons and devils are out to get him, or the devil, right? I mean, he believes that the devil is always trying to get him, and demons and stuff, and he sees these demons, right? And so, he'd be in his room having these psychotic episodes and then come out and, in the middle of the night and walk around and, talking about the fact that he should kill us all because God would be happy because we were all evil. And as a child, I'd be sitting there thinking, oh my God, he's going to kill us, And I'd already been being abused by these two monsters, you know what I mean? And so the fear that puts into you, you're just sitting there just going, oh my God, he's going to, at some point he's going to snap and he's going to kill us all. You really start to believe that what that person is saying is true. And so, the fear starts to get a hold of you, especially when there's physical pain being inflicted behind it, on top of it, right? And so, their strengths, how, that they could kill you. They could seriously, if they wanted to, take you out. And so, you just start developing some fears. And then, with the mental illness and stuff that was going on in my family, my mom was manic depressive, always talking about suicide, committing suicide. And my dad was suicidal and actually used to run around trying to kill himself. So, it was people would say, well, how would you even know that wasn't normal? But, there is that whole level of fear and horror that goes along with that. Even though I was used to it because that's what I grew up around, I grew up in it, it did cause me to have some serious issues like nervous tics. I had a lot of nervous tics because of that. It manifested itself, in many different ways in my life, And I had a lot of just innate, fear, a fear of being in my home. I actually felt safer out on the streets. I mean, I was, felt much safer at other people's homes and out on the streets than I did at my home. So, it's like a lot of fear, a lot of, and then a lot of sadness because I knew that my parents, they were not telling me they loved me. They were not showing that they loved me. So, or even the other siblings. It was, people would say, how would you know you were being abused? Well, it's like, well, until I was just living that way. That's just the way I was living. It's not that I liked it. It's not that I enjoyed it. You know what I mean? I did not enjoy any of that, right? And there's this mistake that people make when they think about children who've been abused, and they make this mistake of thinking, well, it couldn't have been that bad, and how would you even know if you had been abused and stuff like this? And it's like, well, once you talk to somebody or you see enough people on the outside who are living a different way, and you see that that's not the norm, and that really shouldn't be the norm, and then they start talking to you and they start telling you stuff like, hey, you're a good kid, you sure don't deserve to be treated like that, and if you were my kid, I'd just love you to pieces, because I do, these people were very good to me, this family, and they taught me a lot, and so I started to realize, wow, what a really twisted childhood I had, you know what I mean? And I started to actually almost take a serious look at it from that point, and realize that, hey, not one of that was my responsibility or my fault. Not one of those situations, And it was bizarre. It was completely bizarre. And was it fun? No. And that's the whole issue. That's so incredibly wrong to do to children, to do to your family, to cause them this pain and this suffering. You know what I mean? And people out there would think, oh, it's just no big deal. And there's other people that think, well, how would you even know if you had been abused? Because you know what I mean? You know. People are it's if you have to ask yourself the question and you have to think about it, then you know. Because if you had a great childhood and everything was just wonderful and ducky and peachy, and you might have even been disciplined a little harshly at one point or something, but your parents loved you and cared about you and treated you pretty decently, well, you're going to know, because children, they know. And when you grow up, So, yeah, a lot of people, it's very bizarre how people feel about the whole issue of child abuse and what it actually does to children. So many people like to think that it's just not that big of a deal. And then others think, well, was I abused? You know what I mean? Well, you have to, sometimes people block it out. And so you have to get professional help with a lot of that. And, sometimes, people dissociate and because of the abuse, right? So sometimes people ask themselves these questions, was I abused? You know what I mean? Because they don't really even know if what they experienced was abuse. And I would say to talk to a professional, really, or talk to someone who knows and who's trained and who can kind of help you, like a counselor, or find a therapist who works with you. If you get a therapist or counselor, this is what I've heard, and they don't work with you and it just doesn't seem comfortable, just get another one. You know what I mean? Because you just keep looking for that help where you can find it, right? We have about 10 seconds left. Thanks, everybody, for being here. I really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place, One Child Abuse Survivor to another 6 a.m. Taking another look at some of these articles here, and I hope you will go check this out, mentalhelp.net. And that's what that's called, www.mentalhelp.net. And you can go through and find the articles on abuse and whatnot, child abuse and domestic violence, right? So have a great day, everybody. If you need something, get a hold of me here on Facebook or Blog Talk Radio. I'll be around later on, and we'll talk to you soon. Take care, everybody. Have a great day. Have a good night, Gypsy Witch. That's my friend from Australia, my good friend. And everybody else, have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you real soon. Bye-bye.